Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Alberta Freemason podcast. My name is John Hayes. I'm the Worshipful Master of Highlands Unity Lodge and the past Sovereign Grand Master of the Allied Masonic Degrees of Canada. I'm joined today by Very Worshipful Brother Preston Meyer, past Grand Chaplain and past Master of Acacia Lodge number 11, and the editor of the Alberta Freemason. I'm also joined by Tobias Terrill. Right Worshipful Brother Tobias is a past District Deputy Grand Master. I'm joined by Right Worshipful Brother Chuck Rose, the Deputy Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Alberta, and Very Worshipful Brother Lardeon Ranon, the Grand Organist of the Grand Lodge of Alberta. So Preston, do you want to start with a question or two for Brothers Ranon and Rose?
Well, I'm curious about your musical journeys. What brought you to be musicians as you are today?
I'll start. My long story short is that ever since I was 3 years old, I wanted to be a singer. When I was 3 years old, I knew all the words to all the Perry Como songs on the radio in the mid 1950s. And anybody who asked this little 3-year-old kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a singer like Perry Como.
So at what point did you pick up the guitar?
I was already singing in a band when I was in my mid-teens, 16, 17. And there was a young lady in one of the bands who taught me 3 chords on the guitar. And that was it for me. I literally, I'm not exaggerating. I dropped out of school. I played my guitar 6 to 8 hours a day until I was good enough on the guitar to accompany my singing, at which point I began to make musical bookings and got paid to sing from the time I was 18 until my last paid gig was last week.
That's pretty great. Do you play any other instruments?
I can play the mandolin a little bit and a bit of harmonica. I have a baran, a hand drum, Irish hand drum that I'm not bad on. But no, guitar is my main thing. But all of it is just to accompany my singing. I just love to sing. And if I can sing and get people to sing with me, that's when I'm alive.
Isn't the voice one of the greatest instruments of all time?
Oh, it is the greatest instrument, in my opinion. The things you can do you can do so much with the voice. A good vocal choral group can duplicate the sound of a symphony orchestra. Symphony orchestra, I'm sorry, they can't duplicate the sound of human voices.
One of the things I've often heard said is that if an instrument is being played particularly brilliantly by someone, that he makes it sing.
Yes, absolutely.
They don't ever say, my goodness, that operatic singer manages to sound very much like a second violin.
they do actually sometimes.
Yeah, that's true.
And I've also heard when you get a group of 3 great vocalists singing, you got 3-part harmony, but it sounds like 5 parts. It's amazing how the overtones and the harmonics kick in. Take it, Lardeon.
I studied music piano when I was in high school, and I studied for 2 years piano, but then I stopped because I find it hard reading the advanced piano pieces, so I stopped after 2 years, and then I found my interest in music in piano. It went back again after I realized that I can play piano by just listening to music, and then I can play by ear. So that's my interest in piano started when I can play by ear, and then when after my Master Mason's degree, a brother in Strathcona, he's a bass player. He asked me if I can join his band. I said I haven't been in a band before, but then he said, "Oh, you can try," and that was 2017, and until now we're playing in the same band. So that's my musical background.
What about the differences between Western and other musics? So we have kind of European music has a very specific sound range and sound type, and something like Indian music or Chinese music or Japanese music or Maori music all sounds massively different. And even within European music, there are kind of subgroups like Basque music and things like that, which are very interestingly different. Have you guys explored any of that?
For me, I only play music that I like. It's I I find it challenging to play music that I don't resonate with or enjoy. So to really bring music to life, I must have a connection. So I regarding those European, I I don't know. I just play whatever that is pleasant to my ears. That's it.
Various different cultures in the world have had the a different development of music where they use a different scale entirely. And the scale that is used in Indian music, for instance, instead of the 12 notes that we have to go from C to C on the piano, that's right, isn't it? There's 12 keys to get from C to C, isn't that right,
Kind of.
Lardeon?
There's
Yeah.
the octave of A through G, but then there's those extra five
Yeah.
halfway notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that adds up to 12, yeah.
Seven full
Anyway,
notes and five sharps or flats.
the scale on the Indian music has, I believe it's 9 notes, but I could be wrong. And it doesn't follow the same scale that we have, which is one of the reasons the music sounds so strange to our ear. We're expecting to hear the notes that we're familiar with, but they play a different scale. And then they've got different rhythms too. The drums that the Indian people use, and I'm talking about the East Indian, the subcontinent of Asia. They've got the tabla and things like that have these wonderful, complicated rhythms that are very different from what we hear. For us, it's rock and roll. It's 4/4 with a downbeat kind of thing. Um,
Yeah, and we have some complicated stuff in Western music too, like syncopation and things like that,
yeah,
which creates. I mean, people like Scott Joplin did that
yeah.
and wrote in that, and it's even that sounds way different to our ears just because of the beat. Um, so yeah, and then you look at something like throat singing and things that are at the risk of sounding very Western, almost completely foreign to everything that I hear. So I hear Inuit throat singing and Tuvan throat singing and people
Yeah.
doing that. And the other one that has always struck me as odd is just how many people have invented the various forms of organ and portable organ. It's interesting to see, and also bagpipes. Lots of people. It isn't just Scotland. All over the world, there are bag reservoirs for air so that you can play longer than you can breathe. And it's the bagpipe.
What instruments or what famous musicians do we all know of that were Freemasons and maybe had an influence on urban music as it popular music, I guess, as it increased?
I think I read somewhere that Scott Joplin was a member of a Prince Hall Lodge.
Yeah,
Oscar Peterson here in Canada
yeah,
was
Duke.
a member of Prince Hall Lodge. Rick Wakeman is he's a keyboard player in, what was the band he was with? Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes,
Uh,
yes.
Well,
and
and today Brad Paisley is a famous Freemason.
yeah,
Duke Ellington is for sure. That's a given. But even going back centuries, like Mozart was,
yeah.
there's many influential Irving Berlin, some of my
Robbie
favorite.
Burns.
Yeah, well, Robbie Burns, of course. It's interesting how Masonic songs have the lyrics have changed for various songs, popular songs or songs that we would know, such as "God Save the King." The song, the original music to that came from a Masonic song, and then of course the lyrics were changed.
Interesting. And the Masonic songs we use in lodges and other Masonic groups are almost all set. The words are set to commonly known hymn tunes. It'll say, and it'll just list the name for whatever the tune is, and the organist will know that tune, and there's only about 6 of them, and so they just play the same tune and we sing different words to it, so it's really quite interesting.
Now, what's funny about that too is that the churches did the same thing exactly.
Mhm.
And I believe it was John Wesley who was famous for he'd go out and he'd be walking by a pub and he'd hear them singing a pub song in there, and the songs in the pubs were all about drinking and getting drunk and doing stupid things, and he would hear the tune and say, "Oh, I can write a nice Christian lyric to that," and he would take it back, and he got all kinds of heck from his parishioners and from some of his superiors. You can't take those the devil's songs and turn them into Christian songs. And he said, "Well, I just did." So, and that's what has survived. We don't remember the pub version of it, but we remember the John Wesley hymn version.
That's true. I know that Beethoven, Mozart, Brahms, and Bach all traveled and listened to folk songs, and then took the folk songs, the pub songs, or the agricultural work songs, that kind of, and they would then set them to instruments, and they sound very symphonic to our ears because that's what they were doing. But what they did was they took, the Bulgarian field harvesting song and they set it to music. And I know that Beethoven has dozens of compositions that are songs that he heard in the field, heard in the pub, heard while he traveled about.
So another quick search here shows Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, Handel, apparently at one point was a Freemason.
Of all the composers, and there's dozens that have been named, and you can add Liszt and Sibelius and Sullivan of Gilbert and Sullivan as well. Who is the most influenced by Freemasonry? Who put more Masonry into the music? I have some ideas on that. I think a lot of people would say Mozart did, but have you guys got any thoughts on that?
The one I'm most familiar with is Robbie Burns. It shows up in quite a few places in his poetry and in his music, and because I love Robbie Burns' suppers, I've learned a whole bunch of his songs, and I mean, you can get the message of brotherhood and masonry and equality, and his song "A Man's a Man for All That" is it's a statement of Freemasonry almost.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that song.
The one that comes to mind for me is John Philip Sousa.
Mm-hmm.
That would be, he was active his entire life in Freemasonry, obviously very active in and very skilled with music, but did an incredible work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I really, there's a lot of masonry in Sousa, because that's always the question I have. How much of masonry are the people taking into their lives rather than, you know, did they join a lodge? Well, yes, but how much influence did it have? I still say Mozart is also on the list. He wrote music for lodges, for use in his lodge. When his father joined, he wrote, when his father became a fellow craft, he wrote the fellow craft's journey for the occasion. And of course, he wrote the Magic Flute, which is a Masonic and Hermetic masterpiece, really, and it's remarkable. And of course, he was a performer too. He was a keyboard player and a violinist, and rather in demand for that as well when he was alive.
And somewhere I read that Mozart, when he became a Freemason, he stayed as the organist for his lodge and never recanted from that,
I think he was the organist in his lodge for
or for
I
many,
want
many years.
I want to say from about 1778 to about 1790.
Wow.
So
That's a very interesting thing that he was the organist in his lodge. And I've been to so many installations across Alberta in the last 3 years, and rarely do I see a lodge appoint, acquire a Masonic organist anymore. And
Well,
I'm really sad because to me, when I'm in a lodge where they play music, even if it's just the organist providing background and fills when there's a bit of dead air. If you ever get to King Solomon Lodge in Cochrane, um, their Brock Smith is their keyboard player, and anytime there's a piece of a place where there's nothing happening, Brock's there filling that space. And the result is you don't have any dead air in Cochrane at King Solomon Lodge. And to me, the bane of our existence, or one of the banes of our existence, is dead air. These places in our lodges when nothing's happening and everybody's like looking around at each other and what are we doing now? Who's next? Or so and so is speaking next, but they're taking 4 minutes to get to the lectern. Well, when you've got a keyboard player there to provide a little bit of tinkle tinkle and maybe a song that everybody can relate to while the person's walking to the place where they're supposed to be, it just fills out the evening, and suddenly what could have been a boring moment is a moment where you get to have a little singing a song in your head. Maybe a bit of a giggle because the keyboard player's got some wit. He might come up with a piece. Like, I mean, I love the thing that our senior Grand Warden does when he's piping in the new Grand Master, and then towards the end of it he goes into the Imperial March from Star Wars, and it's just it's just perfect, and everybody who hears it and relates to it is like, oh, that's good, perfect timing, and that kind of thing. Just that really brings us together.
We know that Freemasonry and had music throughout the ritual. Somewhere through that process, it stopped, or it's virtually non-existent.
Yep.
And my question was, why? Why do we think that's happened? Is it a case of a lack of players, like organists or pianists, or is it a case of maybe the lack of size? So if you get a smaller crowd, it becomes less and less impressive. So people's voices stand out a bit more. And so maybe they don't want to sing. Maybe they're not comfortable in a small crowd. Or is it just we just become lazy?
Tobias, first, not all lodges have a dedicated musician. When a lodge does have one, sometimes they are appointed as an officer of the lodge. For example, I have served as an organist 3 times in the Grand Lodge. However, I only played few times in Strathcona, specifically during our past master night and the most recent installation and investiture of officers. Because, but now I'm an IPM, maybe I can play more next year. So I think we need to get more dedicated musician, and I think it's also lodge traditions. It's not in their traditions that to sing during the business meeting or something. But there are lodges like I've been in Leduc, Star of the West, and it is part of their ceremony that they sing in their business meeting.
Yeah. Well, and in today's world, like I'm looking at a website right now with all sorts of Masonic music. In fact, it talks about the specifics on when to use it for what, for opening, closing, for different degrees, and things like that. So this is music that you can have queued up as long as you've got internet and audio within your lodge. You can queue this up as you have these various perambulations and things like that. Today I was in, we did a field day for 2 Royal Arch degrees and had music going as we were perambulating around the lodge, and it made a difference. Some were singing, some were making jokes, but it made a difference. And so I would encourage lodges to consider that as part of your whatever it is that you're doing. So fill those, just as Chuck said, fill those spaces. The music is there. You just have to open it and find the link.
Yeah, our lodge is not very musical at this point. It was when I became a Mason many years ago. And we have song sheets. We have song sheets that are passed out, used to be passed out at the start of every meeting. And in the opening, the closing, there would be singing, even at a business meeting. But really what happened is once we no longer could find an organist, it went away. And I think maybe the suggestion of laziness, or that might be a bit harsh, but ease of operation might be a better way of putting it. It's just easier not to do it. And so I think a lot of people just decided not to. Preston and I were discussing this earlier this week, and that was kind of the conclusion I came to, is that really it's more of a decision by negation than it is a decision to not do it. It's really a decision that they just let it slide away more than anything else. And if that's laziness, it is, but I don't know that it's just laziness. I think it may be lack of focus on that. So it's not something people pay attention to that much. And it's too bad, because I'd love to go to a lodge where the music, I'd really like to visit, if I ever get a chance to visit Chelsea Lodge in London, because that's the lodge where all the musicians are members. I don't even know if one could get in. It might be the kind of thing where, yeah, only 6 people can come in and you're not on the list. But be interesting to see if you could visit.
Now, Lardeon, I have to tell you, I was at United Grand Lodge of England, and their organ is absolutely impressive. All covered in all kinds of gold and spectacular. And I'm told at one point, somewhere else built an organ slightly bigger than theirs. And the United Grand Lodge of England paid somebody to come so that they could add more pipes to the United Grand Lodge of England, just so we could have a larger organ.
I see a metaphor there.
There's some envy here.
Well, and if you've ever been in the grand meeting room at United Grand Lodge of England, it is absolutely impressive. Google it, look at the pictures, look at the organ in the background there. It is impressive. It really is.
Now we've got one in Calgary that's pretty impressive too.
We have a famous church in the Philippines because it has a big organ made of bamboo. It is called the bamboo organ.
Wow.
So I remember I was with my that time I'm still courting my wife, and we passed by that church, and I want to listen to the organ. So I told her that, can we stop and go inside the church, because I want to hear the organ. And my wife thought, my girlfriend that time, and he thought I was a very devoted Catholic, because I want to go to the church, but really I just want to hear the sound of the bamboo organ.
That would be something to check out, though.
Yeah,
That would be quite neat to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, in the Philippines, it's called the bamboo organ church.
There's another aspect to this that I think is we're missing something because of the lack of music. And that is all kinds of research has been done on creating feelings of bonding, of teamwork, of family, of commitment to each other. And the more things we do in unison with each other. So walking in unison, when they teach soldiers to march, and they get all these guys marching in same step with each other. And as they do it in some of their training, they do it with songs. They become totally committed to each other as they march and sing together. And another thing they do is they eat together. The action of putting food in our mouths at the same time, that's a bonding experience. And there's research on this that says this is the kind of thing that we need to do to bond and become more of a family, to improve and increase our brotherhood. And I really want to see more of this in our lodges. So I'm committing. My year as Grand Master starts in 4 months. God save us. Oh, I don't know how we're going to do this, but
Another way to reference that is we're 16 months away from you being done.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got 16 months to get to fulfill this promise to myself and this commitment that I'm making in my Deputy Grand Master's plan for the year, that I'm going to encourage. I don't know all the things I'm going to do, but I'm going to encourage music in the lodges, and that we provide that we can eliminate dead air right off the top by putting music in wherever there's dead air.
I'm curious, do any of you have any philosophies that you attach to music?
For me, I think music should create a meaningful connection both to the individual and the purpose it serves. For example, when just like what I said earlier, I don't play music that I don't like. So I want to play music to enjoy it. So to truly bring music to life, uh, I must have a connection. And when playing the organ during the opening and closing of the Bible, the music should be slow and solemn, enhancing the sacred atmosphere, allowing everyone to feel the ceremony solemnity. And that's for me. That's my I think my philosophy in music. You need to enjoy it.
I really want to find the appropriate spot in our ritual for the John Philip Sousa march that Monty Python uses. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would be great. I'm going to task both of you as our musicians to learn more John Philip Sousa. Let's hear more of it within all of our perambulations.
My thought on answering Preston's question is, I've always, my father was a classical music composer and was actually Grand Lodge of Alberta organist, I think 55 years ago this year. But he taught me a lot about music, and one of the things that he was really interested in, and I think is passed on to me, is the interrelationship between music and mathematics, between music and geometry, between music and the structure of sentences and words and grammar in a way. It ties it all together in a fascinating kind of thing. I read a book years ago called Gödel, Escher, Bach, The Eternal Golden Braid by Douglas Hofstadter, which I want to go on record as saying I never remember names or titles, and I just did that off the top of my head. But I read it, and it's a fascinating kind of philosophical examination of how all of these things are intertwined. And from a Masonic perspective, one can go to the seven liberal arts and sciences and say music and grammar and rhetoric and geometry and astronomy are all tied together. And I think we go back to the Greeks who used to talk about the music of the spheres. And I think it's fascinating to see just how integrated all of our modes of communication are. And so that, when Chuck says when something happens and music makes it a more profoundly interesting experience in a lodge, what I hear is the music is integrating the members into the actual process of whatever they're going through, the initiation, the passing, the raising, whatever they're doing is becoming a bit more profound and maybe a bit more meaningful because it is done to music.
Lardeon, we appreciate the music that you've recorded for this
Yes.
podcast because it's helped us greatly. So thank you very much. And an open invitation to our current Grand Pipers to record something with us, and we'll happily incorporate it into the podcast as well.
I'm just happy to be here. I just want to say that Masons listening to music together, whether it is an organ or bagpipes, it fosters shared emotional experience, reinforcing the bonds among the brethren.
Thank you very much. And with that, thanks to all of you for taking part, and thanks to everyone out there for joining us for another episode of the Alberta Freemason, with voices from across Alberta and music from our grand organist, very worshipful brother Lardeon Ranon, who we actually heard in the podcast today, speaking, not just playing. And with that, we're happy to meet, sorry to part, and happy to meet again.